So when it comes to working with complete beginners to the gym, what do you think are like the key fundamentals they need to nail down when it comes to training?
Regardless of what level you're at, you don't need to train for your competition. You need to learn how to train.
I think people overlook the basics, and people also don't truly understand what the basics are. Because I've heard so many coaches go, "Yeah, you got to do the basics, right? You got to squat, bench, and dead." I went, "They're the basics."
Teach someone how to move, get them strong, get them well conditioned, respect rest periods as much as I could at the same time, still keep them engaged, having fun, and progress.
How do you know where failure is if you haven't gone there? How do you know where hard work is if you hadn't done 60 sessions a week of half-an-hour sessions?
Last set, just get them doing a set till failure. And they always bang out fucking, oh look, set 2, set 3, they did their 10 reps, they feel fucked. Let's give them an extra set, how many reps can you get? And they fucking bang out 30 reps or 20 reps or 15 reps. That's not teaching us as coaches. That's teaching the fucking client that they have another gear. They probably have another 3, 4, 5 gears to go as beginners.
So Steve, last time we sat down, we spoke about high rocks competitions. And while I think programming for high rocks is super important, this is a relatively advanced event, right? Especially from an aerobic conditioning standpoint. Yet the popularity of it, we're going to get more beginners wanting to do this than ever before. So I think there's almost a rite of passage here of like helping, for everyone wanting to learn what we talked about last time we spoke, you probably need to go through this episode first. So when it comes to working with complete beginners to the gym, what do you think are like the key fundamentals they need to nail down when it comes to training first?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's important that we go over this on a little podcast because, like, when I think about these high rocks competitors, I always tell them when you've got your first high rocks, regardless of what level you're at, you don't need to train for your competition. You need to learn how to train, and as beginners, I think that's important. They need to first and foremost learn how to train, and that's a combination of how to technically move well, how to be resilient, how to not be injured, how to move with tempo, control, different exercise variations, and learn the importance of rest periods and different rep schemes and build strength and a good global athletic physique and body. You know what I mean? So I think the basics go really far, as me and the basics go so far, but I think a lot of people overlook the basics. They overlook the basics.
I think people overlook the basics, and people also don't truly understand what the basics are.
True.
Because I've heard so many coaches go, "Yeah, you got to do the basics, right? You got to squat, bench, and dead." I went, "They're the basics." Like, if we take looking at a squat, and that's probably the best example here, right? The range of motion you got to have through your ankle, the knee, the hip, the ability to brace your spine, the range of motion through your shoulder to get under a bar, right? Then you've got to do all these things together, timed, synergistically. Is a monstrous ask. And I think people jump to these sort of like almost advanced workouts. They run before they can walk. It's the same thing with like beginners doing walking lunges. I'm like, you're now not only doing a lift, which is quite advanced in itself, you are now doing it dynamically, step to step, hoping you're landing in the right position. So like, if we're looking at beginner exercises, like what is, in your view, the beginners?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, can the client create a stable base to work from? First and foremost, can they, it's easy to understand from a listener perspective if we just take body parts and like just work from the inside out. So let's just take that core, that trunk first. Like, can they control their rib cage position? Okay, as coaches, we understand rib cage positioning is important for breathing mechanics, posture, lower back pain, hip mobility, etc., thoracic mobility. Like, having that rib cage control. So can we do, dead bugs well? Can we do side planks well? Can we do front planks well? Can we do different variations of them? Can we do Pallof presses well? Can we, counter rotational exercises well, where we have to brace, breathe, and be under some pressure, whether that's 10 seconds of pressure as a beginner or 60 seconds of, and even an unstable surface or something that's throwing you off for your stability. And then we can move out from there. Can we go into, the hips and the lower back and the glutes? Can we do good isometric glute bridge positions, for example? I'm just thinking off the top of my head. Can we hinge properly? Can we bend the knees fully in a split squat, a step up? Can we move the shoulder overhead? Can we move the arm overhead? Do we have full mobility and function of the shoulder? And then we just build them out. Like, can we create these positions and work them in different angles? And once they can move well and get into many positions, then they can move on to bigger complex programs and movement patterns.
Yeah, I've you mentioned isometrics there, and isometric is something that I've always appreciated as a beginner, a teaching tool, a way of creating better range of motion, contraction, where the nervous system feels a little bit unstable. But I never truly appreciated the power of it until I started doing my own PT sessions with Michael Goulden. And so much of what I've done with him has been isometrics. Like, my program isn't isometrics. They're like basic top set per exercise, sort of like in and out the gym sort of stuff. But what I've done in sessions, we've tested where our range of motion is. We've tested where I lose strength. And then we've gone in and held isometrics in these positions. And I think as a beginner tool, and this is something I learned from RTS, like, the early phases, you're training muscles. Because if you want to be able to control a joint through a movement, what moves the joint? Muscles. So if you can get each of those individual muscles, each of those individual components stable and strong, then we can bring in the skill and start to learn to integrate via those muscles. And for me, when I've worked with clients of this has been almost like that, the learning that and understanding that and programming that way has been where I've had so much of an easier job getting people to squat, hinge, press, because I've stopped trying to rush them into it and going, why can't they do the hinge? Or why can't they squat? I've gone, right, let's get the glutes strong. Let's get them strong through adduction, abduction, internal rotation, external rotation of the hip. Let's get them be able to brace, as you mentioned, right? Then I go, right, let's get them strong in knee extension. Let's get them strong in like plantar dorsiflexion. Cool, squat. Perfect.
Yeah.
And I think it's the step that most of us skip. It's like, right, you got a client in front of you. You got yourself in front of you, right? Where are you strong and where are you weak? Where's that range of motion where it all just goes pitong? Well, let's hold an isometric there for a little while. Let's work in that range and teach the nervous system, I'm all right here. I'm cool. And then let's start to add some movement. Do you think that like the heavy control work still applies? Let's say if you have a beginner who wanted to get into this to train for CrossFit or high rocks, because things like the wall ball, it's not hypertrophy, so they won't need control in these exercises or muscular contraction although they still need muscular contraction, but they won't need the slow and controlled tempo like a bodybuilder would. Do you still think it's important to train like that, even if it's not how you perform the exercise?
Yeah, 100%. Because, if you're taking that example, then we've got to think of, joint mechanics, movement mechanics, the skill of what you're doing. Okay, so you pretty much, if anyone doesn't know what a wall ball is, where have they been? But you basically squat down, and as you come up, you throw the ball over at the wall. Which is funny enough, on Saturday, I did them 100 reps. It was the first time I've ever done them. But I did them fine. How can I do them perfectly if I've never trained it before? Well, I squat, back squat, front squat, and I do a lot of overhead presses. And, I've done some sort of thruster movement before or push press movement. They all may not be specifically that wall ball, but they all very much mimic the wall ball movement. So, it's a very similar movement pattern. So, yes, you need to train the skill if you're going to be doing something like that in a competition, but you don't just need to do wall balls. You need to do your squat and hinging movements. You need to be going up and down, overhead pressing, and doing everything to create, like I said earlier, that global athleticism. So you know how to push, pull, hinge, hike, brace, overhead press, push, pull, everything. You know what I mean? And your brain learns new skill, innit? But then also, if you're doing high reps, you're going to be taxing those slow twitch muscle fibers. So you better expose your body to those slow tempos, whether it's with pauses, with slow eccentrics, slow concentrics. Some people like that sort of stuff. Quarter reps, whether it's paused reps, whether it's drop sets, and different isometrics, different methods to expose your body to those slow twitch fiber endurance.
I think sometimes it's an element of you have to like learn something to unlearn it to come back stronger. So like if we look at some of the stuff that we're looking at, again, we're saying we're using high rocks as an example here, but like if we're looking at a sport where things are getting maybe more ballistic and less controlled and less tempo, well, let's look at, we mentioned the wall ball. Let's use the wall ball as an example, right? We don't want to slow down, pause, contract up for 3 seconds and then throw, because we wouldn't get much power. But we almost need to learn this, because to do a wall ball well, we will need to be able to control and time contractions of the quads. Potentially, you're going to your toes, the calf. You're going to need to control the glutes. You're going to be able to need to work the shoulders, the pecs. There's going to be a bunch of stuff, triceps, bunch of stuff that comes into play here. So we need to be able to control all those muscles. So we need to learn that, get them strong, and the best way to get them strong and have some hypertrophy is by slow, controlled tempo. And then once you've learned that, right, then the goal is then to bring that into a performance standpoint. So maybe we learn those things individually. Maybe first phase of wall ball would be something like, okay, let's look at doing some leg presses, some good girl, bad girl machine, some tricep extensions, some incline dumbbell presses or machine shoulder presses, working some dead bugs, some bracing work. Maybe then phase 2, you start moving into some squatting variations, you start moving into some standing overhead press variations. And then down the line, like in a future phase, you then maybe can unlearn the tempo stuff and then add power and speed into it. Because like when we look at bodybuilders, for sake of argument, old school bodybuilders, and they explode up and go quick. And everyone goes, well, like, Branch Warren trains quick, maybe not a great example. Arnie trains quick. Why can't I train? Why shouldn't I train quick? I'm like, well, Arnie has done that for so many years, to the point where he can fire up a chest press at explosive tempos and contract everything he wants to because he's efficient.
Yeah.
Whereas you have no idea. So efficiency is what's lacking here.
And exactly, it's efficiency, and you got to think that, like, when you're moving at those speeds, you need a very, very high level of nervous system ability, nervous system control, neuromuscular proficiency. You know what I mean? To do that, because if you're training power on a wall ball, for example, in speed, speed is it's determined by your ability to control your neuromuscular system. Can't do that, then you ain't going to move fast, and that's why you need to move slow to learn how to move fast. And it's the same as Arnie, for example, doing bodybuilding, moving fast. He's so proficient at it, and he has such a high skill level. He doesn't have any energy leaks. Whereas if you just take the normal person, they're going to have a lot more energy leaks, whether it's mobility issues in the ankles, that they're dissipating power in their hips, or they're getting pulled forward too much because they don't have thoracic mobility or posterior chain strength, or they don't have good core anterior strength. There's so many different things it could be in it. And as coaches, we understand this, but maybe the client doesn't.
You mentioned a bunch of methods earlier, like drop sets and isometrics and, eccentrics and things like this. So let's bring this down into something actionable for somebody, whether it's a coach with their clients or whether it's something like someone with themselves. We mentioned efficiency. Like, you get a beginner in the gym. Like, how do you start to piece together a plan to make them efficient? Let's use the example of high rocks. But let's say, like, I'm completely beginner, I have no idea in the gym, right? I go, right, what are the skills? What's the weight training list that I want them to get to? And then what's the sort of, assuming they're a complete beginner and don't know their arse and their elbow, what's that path to get them there and then moving on to their performance?
Well, let's keep it simple. They need to learn how to, for me, my philosophy would be they need to learn how to brace. Mm-hmm. Then they need to learn how to horizontally push and pull, vertically push and pull, and hinge and squat. and they need a really strong posterior chain. So that's glutes, hamstrings, calves, lower backs, and postural muscles. Like how that gets put together will vary for different people depending on their history, their experience, their injuries, and I mean there's a lot of variations on what we can do with that. But you've got to get all those basic patterns down, in my opinion. You know what I mean? And again, it's building that global athleticism, whether it's an 80-year-old female or a 15-year-old kid who's aspiring to be a bodybuilder or a high level athlete. They've got to learn basic skills and motor pattern. And I think doing all that stuff we hear all the time, you've got to learn how to do all those things that we mentioned. They'll learn how to do it.
When it comes to I quite like the idea of like categorizing it into movement patterns, because like I've always looked at it. The ones that I look at when I build a beginner program, I look at vertical push and pull, right? So some form, and again, vertical is relative to someone's overhead range.
Yeah.
I look at horizontal push and pull, and then for the lower body, I'll look at a bilateral squatting pattern, which could be as simply as a leg press if I just need the muscles to work and contract, and progress all the way up to a squat if I want. And I like, from what I do, most of the stuff I do is body composition goals for clients. Does anyone need to squat, bench, and dead? Absolutely not. Yeah. But I do like to have some form of squatting pattern in there because it has an expression of the mobility of those joints. But two, I think that having some form of squatting pattern keeps training fun in 10 years when bodybuilding's lost its muster, because you've got something you can load for a long period of time. Some form of hinging pattern, which could be like hip extension, could be incline hyper, could be barbell hip thrust, all the way up to deadlift variations. And then the two that what people often forget is going to be some form of unilateral squat and some form of knee flexion. Like knee flexion, in terms of the hamstrings, will stabilize the knee joint, will potentially help stabilize the pelvis, are going to be important in things like running, right? We're going to be looking at unilateral squat patterns, so split squat, single leg press, things like this, which allows us to work internal rotation more, allows us to open up the rec fem, which kind of gets issues to people, and a bunch of other stuff. So we can start looking at sort of like those sort of like 8 movement patterns for most people. Like, right, if you can get good at like these 8 and find an exercise for these 8 that you engage with, connect with, and can progress, then over time, we can then, as you get efficient with those, it's like, well, then we can take a few of these away and then just prioritize the few. Like, if I was training you, Steve, I could probably get you better at squatting by doing more squatting. But if I got Steve from Kent, he probably needs to have the individual components of a squat. He probably needs the muscles around his squat to be strong. Whereas you may just need more practice. And that's the difference between the beginner and the advanced person.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, definitely. So like if you're working with a beginner client, seeing as that we're talking about beginners and training, what sort of, if they're training, say 3 days a week, what sort of, and they have, they're beginner, no injuries, and they've never trained before, what sort of programming structure method may you use?
Well, I've clearly been in UP for 8 years, but I'm still a fan of sort of full body, relatively job and body composition, which people don't know is sort of like upper lower supersets. Although I'm not married to that. Like if their gym doesn't allow it, it can be agonist antagonist. But I like to try and get people in and out of the gym as quickly as possible.
You want to tell the viewers why that works well? Why the GBC works?
Yeah. I think there's a bunch of reasons, right? But, like Charles talked about like growth hormone. We can talk about improving sort of cardiovascular conditioning and aerobic health, because if we're going from the quads and then going up to the chest, for sake of argument, it's going to create what we call peripheral heart action. The heart works harder, so it's got more of a cardiovascular benefit. That is all true. But I think the big thing for me with beginners, it's trying to make sure that they're as efficient with the time they spend in the gym as they can be. They can be in and out of the gym in 40, 45 minutes. Now, this does a couple of things, right? One, for the person that maybe not as keen on the gym, it gets them going. It takes away a lot of excuses and barriers to entry. But the other thing I like about short, sharp, full body workouts is that most people come in with an overly full stress cup, right? We have toxic load, we have gut issues, we have nutrient deficiencies, we have mental stress, physical stress, we have sleep deprivation, we have all this stuff that suggests that they won't be able to recover from a bunch of training volume. So if I can cut this down to the minimum effective dose, and then I go, right, we can either add or take away from here based off what I see, whilst I work on some of this stuff in the background, or whilst I work on building an aerobic base, which if this person has a goal of doing, high rocks is going to be massively important. Even if they don't, it's going to improve their cellular health and mitochondrial efficiency and stuff like this. So, and for people who don't know what I mean by mitochondrial efficiency, that's that little bit in the cell that makes all our sort of like energy. So if we can get them working well, we make more energy, not just physical energy, but like how many calories we expend and stuff like this. A lot of good shit happens.
Yeah.
That sort of answers that. So
Yeah, cool.
I tend to I normally full body 3 times a week. I have those 8 movement patterns. I prioritize on the third day. I probably do a day where I prioritize the ones I want to focus on more. And then on my end of my workout, I put in some bracing work or remedial work, or it's just whatever they want from a physique standpoint.
Yeah, cool. Nice. Yeah, very similar to mine. Maybe very similar to a lot of coaches out there from that UP Poliquin background. I love GBC as well, German Body Comp. I think it's time effective, gets people working hard, exposes them to a lot of different exercises, which is good. Lots of different variations, lots of exercises. You can combine, simple exercises such as leg presses, machines, that sort of stuff, with goblet squats or back squats or any sort of little bit more complex movements, complex movements. So you could mix it really well and hit a ton of muscle groups, which is why it's so effective for people. I was working at the gym before for a couple of years when I first got to Australia, and I had a hard time getting used to how the session times were. Half an hour sessions. Now I'm used to training people for 60 minutes in London. I was banging out 30-minute sessions, all right, back to back. So I would start work at 5 a.m. and I would do 12 clients until 11 a.m., sometimes till 12. All right. So I used to do half an hour's, whether it was building muscle, whether it was fat loss, and I had a few, sport performance, I'd get them done in half an hour. Obviously, get them in 5-10 minutes early, do your warm up by yourself, maybe finish with some conditioning or Metcon work by yourself if they were doing that. But for half an hour, I would need to teach someone how to move, get them strong, get them well conditioned, respect rest periods as much as I could at the same time, and still keep them engaged, having fun, and progress. In those 5 years, half an hour sessions, I had more results ever than I ever have before because I became a better coach. My coaching cues were better. My choice on exercise was better. Equipment was better. And now I believe I can coach someone in a 1 square meter area with nothing. You know what I mean? And that's the exposure from half an hour's. Okay. And now I'm, 45, 60-minute sessions. Fucking hell, it's crazy. I've got so much time. But like as a coach, if any coaches are listening, I'd give them a challenge. Can you coach your client in a square? Just keep them in the same area and just whether it's body weight, use a foam roller, 1 bench, or just limit the amount of equipment that you have and see if you can train them for a few weeks like that and see how much you progress as a coach. Your coaching cues, your exercises and everything.
I agree with that tenfold. And like to go on that slight little tangent, this is why I think sometimes, and I don't know, I think coaches stay within the scope of practice. Of course I do. But I think now a lot of people have taken that sentence way too far, which means they don't work with anyone that doesn't even slightly go against what they know. And should you work with someone with an horrendous condition? Should you be working with clients that are pregnant if you have no idea what you're doing? Should you have worked with clients that have got cancer if you have no idea what you're doing? Absolutely not. But on the flip side of this, you've got to test yourself because like you learn from that having to do 30-minute sessions. The times that struck my mind was like, well, what was the times that I learned with this sort of stuff? Well, I learned the most from the pandemic. Like the pandemic was really interesting, right? When people started training outside, and I learned a bunch from that. But I understood, relatively so, and that functional anatomy. So when the pandemic hit and we were training people on Zoom from their living rooms or in parks, I could make a good session because it wasn't about, oh, here's a dumbbell press. It's like, well, the pecs, like, adduct the arm, right? Okay, cool. So I just need to find something that adducts the arm. I can play around with this. But we see so many coaches fall to bits or just not do any sessions because they don't know what to do without their gym.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
The other one I thought, I trained a client who was deaf once. So I couldn't use any of the verbal cues. So I learned a bit of British Sign Language to be able to communicate with him. But I had to really develop the cues in my game to be more touch-based cues and stuff that didn't need verbal because you couldn't hear me. Like I working with people with autoimmune conditions or diabetes or scoliosis or things like this. If I just said no to all of them because I don't know, I don't know sign language, so give them somebody else. Well,
the difference is, you love coaching, you love what you do, so you have a first to learn. You have the growth mindset. You want to learn. You want to be better. Some people ain't like that, unfortunately. So they just take the easy route and they stop coaching after a few years or a few months, and they, they miss on good opportunities that they could have had. I think, like just going back off like those half an hour sessions that I did, I used to do 60 sessions a week, plus up to 80 sessions a week. Imagine I used to do 12 clients in the morning, back to back, all different sessions, all different personalities. There's not a minute break. There's not 1 minute break. You just go bang, 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 bang. Yeah, all high quality sessions because I would never let it drop. Then I will go back and do it again. So in one day, I'd be doing like 20 to 24 sessions. In one day, 24. Imagine, let's say 20 different people in one day. 20 different people. Imagine how many different types of people you're going to get.
Yeah.
That made the levels go up again, even more. That was crazy. I would never do that again. It's too much.
But you learn from those moments, though, right? It's like the same thing when I first started working at UP, and when I was working with you, I was commuting 2.5 hours each way, 6 days a week, coming on Sundays once a month. And I'm like, well, would I do that now? No. Right? Like, but I think learning this as a coach, and this is the same thing for a client in a way as well, right? Do you need to go to failure as a beginner? Well, I think yes. Because the people go, oh, you should leave 1 or 2 in the tank with the beginner because he can't recover. Yes, but their 1 or 2 in the tank is 42 in the tank, right? How do you know where failure is if you haven't gone there? How do you know where hard work is if you hadn't done 60 sessions a week of half-an-hour sessions? So you now know that if you lose a couple of clients, right, the mindset between you and another coach who's never worked that hard is totally different. Don't be wrong. It's losing some clients and losing some money is stressful. But this other coach crumbles. You go, I've got a gear I know I can go to. Like, cool, let me do some outreach. Let me get in a gym. Let me message people. Let me hand out flyers in the rain. These are gears that we know we can go, that other people don't know we can go because we were forced to. They're not natural to us. We wouldn't naturally have chosen to work that hard. We were put in a scenario where we needed to work that hard, which has stayed with us. Yeah.
And you know what? Like for me coming to Australia, I had to do that because I had nothing. I mean, I remember post-workout, I was eating tins of tuna and fucking microwave rice every day for 2 years. Mate, I swear to God, after I got paid and paid my rent, you know how much money I had left in my bank account?
I dread to think.
Bro, I had $30. That's not even £15. Every week, I had £15 left in my bank account. And what did I do with that money? Because I started at 5 a.m., I used to go to the petrol station and get myself a nice flat white. I had zero money left after my flat whites. My missus used to be like, stop wasting your money on coffee. I'm like, I've got no more money left, but I'm starting at 5 a.m. I'm up at fucking 4:15 every day. I might as well treat myself to a coffee, innit? That was a grind for 2 years. That was a grind for 2 years doing that before I started building, external from that gym, That was hard work. But going back to what you said about clients and learning where to push, that's a good something that I learned that was brilliant from you, that you told me to try, that you do with your clients is last set, just get them doing a set till failure. and they always bang out fucking, oh, look, set 2, set 3, they did their 10 reps, they feel fucked. Let's give them an extra set. How many reps can you get? And they fucking bang out 30 reps or 20 reps or 15 reps. Yeah. That's not teaching us as coaches. That's teaching the fucking client that they have another gear. They probably have another 3, 4, 5 gears to go as beginners.
Yeah. And it guides your exercise selection. So it guides your exercise selection and it guides your weight progressions, right? Because if you think you've got 1 in the tank, you can go, okay, cool, we'll keep the weight next week. But then if you've tested them, they go, no, they've got 8 in the tank. Cool, we're going up next week. Yeah. Or if they get immediately sloppy as soon as the pressure hits them, right? And you don't think it's teachable, cool, we regress it. We get them in a leg press. Now you've got nowhere to hide, motherfucker. Work. And it sounds drill sergeant. It sounds like I'm cool, and maybe I am. But there's eventually the client will know where 1 rep in the tank is. And then feel free, be my guest, give them that.
You know what? They need it. You know what? This is one of the reasons why when I work with beginners, the trainer sessions usually for the last couple of years have always started with, bracing work, trunk work, and then I've done some cardio. So for example, I'm working with not like complete beginners this morning, but I had a few beginners in there that have been training for maybe 8 to 10 weeks or so. But what we're doing 3 rounds. We're doing on the air dyne. Actually, I could let them choose. Do you want to go rower or air dyne? They chose the air dyne. Okay, we're going to do 2 minutes on, 1 minute off. And then on your second set, you have to maintain or beat. And on the third set, same again. Now, I play with nasal-only breathing or normal breathing, depending on how they're feeling. But I give them my watch, and I'm looking at their heart rate. Because now I've got real live data to monitor, to track, to see if they're actually just bottling it or not. And that's the good thing about tech. Right? We can use tech to our advantage because, if we're just saying how many reps you got, keep going, they're not aware of where a perceived exertion is. If we can see data and tell them, no, this is how hard you're working. They may say, I'm at 9 out of 10. I can't go. I say, your heart rate is only 110. I know that you can go harder. You're not 9 out of 10. You're more 6 or 7 out of 10. We've got to keep going. Come on, let's go. And that's how they learn, because it's not their fault. They just haven't been educated by the coach properly. This is what hard work is. This is how we gauge. This is how you're meant to feel. This is where your heart rate is meant to be. This is how the intensity is meant to be when you're on this exercise. There's a difference. There's a different feeling to, working to failure on a 2-minute air dyne, and there's a different feeling to working for 20 reps on a leg extension and to a 3-rep max on a back squat. There's a completely different feeling. So they've never done that shit before. You know what I mean? So,
and that's a key thing in its own, right? Because we've established failure. You just establish failure there in 3 different manners. And people go, well, I've hit failure. I know what failure feels like because I've gotten close to failure on a squat. That doesn't necessarily mean you're ready for the burn of a leg extension.
Yeah, exactly.
That does not mean you're ready to go to failure on a cardiovascular piece of kit. Like training a muscle in its shortened range to lengthen range feels very different from a failure standpoint.
And you know what,
harder in some ways. Both of them can be harder in some ways. Go on.
And you know what? Even me, I'm experienced in the weights room. Yeah, I did powerlifting for about 4 years. I didn't touch any high reps or anything. And when I started doing it, leg extensions, high reps and stuff, I couldn't go there. I couldn't go there for the weight that I should be using. I could have a fucking 60% load on. I couldn't get to that point because I was so unfamiliar with it. I couldn't get there. And that's just from being away from it for so long. So as coaches, we need to make sure we go into the trenches often. We work hard. If you're a transformation coach, make sure you do some dieting once or twice a year or something. You know what I mean? Get into the trenches. Make sure that you are familiar with digging deep, being on the grind, and doing those challenging things that we're getting clients to do.
Well, and that's a key thing as well, right? Like in terms of beginners, it's like learning that dieting is relatively hard at times, and that's okay. And being hungry is fine. We live in a world where we've always got delivery, we've always got snacks on hand. So no one really has to grind. No one really has to suffer. It's convenient. And I'm not saying dieting should always be a grind, but there is an element of like, it will get hard if you want something big from this. And I've come to the point now where I can, if I went to a coach's profile and ignore the results on the page, and I'm just looking at their reels, I could tell you that coach gets results from listening to their reels. And normally it's the coaches that sort of rally back against anything that is deemed harder than necessary, right? That I go, right, that guy doesn't get a single result. It's the, like, you can eat anything you want and still get in shape crowd. And technically you can, but it's not about what you're saying per se. It's about the mentality of it. You can tell from that person that they've had a bad dieting experience and they've bounced back into, I'm going to tell clients it can be easier than this. I'm like, well, sometimes it needs to be hard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we know coaches that are like that. And unfortunately, some coaches are good at marketing like that. So they get clients.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like and do you know what? Without changing the topic of this podcast so much, I'm starting to be more worried about the industry now than I've been ever.
Really?
Because it's like doing this thing for a while. Obviously, I work with some great driven coaches, but I'm now following and paying more attention to what coaches are posting online. Maybe I was just oblivious to it before, but like I get, right, we can now fit in brownies and Pop-Tarts into our program and still get in shape. That's cool. I'm fine with that. No problem. But we've gone so far down this calories in versus calories out perspective that I think so many coaches the nutritional quality doesn't matter at all, right? I saw a coach talking about everyone should be having egg whites rather than egg yolks. I'm like, well, it doesn't take you much to peek behind the surface and realize how dumb a statement that is. I've seen people talking about having cheesecakes and being able to fit that in. And it's often guys in their mid-20s who are metabolically healthy that are saying what, like, they would say on one video, don't do the split your favorite influencer does. Just because the split works for them doesn't mean it should work for you. And then they proceed to say, oh, I can eat 12 sandwiches and a cheesecake every day and get in shape, and you can too. Come and sign up to my program. I'm like, well, what about 45-year-old menopausal 54-kilo woman who's 25% body fat? They can't do the same thing as you. Yeah. And we got more, I think it's less coaches that actually really know. Maybe it's just because the industry grows. Know some of this stuff to keep people safe, both from nutritionally and training.
No, I agree. There's more coaches than ever before. There's more uneducated and hopeless coaches than ever before. They ain't got a clue. And again, in some ways it's okay because there's the journey and there's a process. Whether they continue in the industry or not, they may drop off because of might not make any money or retain clients or just don't enjoy it anymore. That's fine. That's the journey for them. And there's a lot of coaches that do progress and learn and become better. You know, I remember 15 years ago, I was probably promoting fish and greens as the best, you know what I mean, 2-week boot camp for people to do, you know, because I saw it somewhere. And now some of my clients will say, I had a client this morning say, I'm going to be doing 3-day breakfast, a juice, a celery juice. I'm like, yeah, cool. Do it then. I don't care. Do it. Monitor your training, your sleep, your recovery, your energy, your mood, your joints. Can you control calories? Okay, if you're not, what do you want to achieve from this? I just want to, my bloatedness, want to get down. Okay, that would probably work. Okay, you may get less bloated, but just monitor those things for me and let's see how you go. Learn from your own experience. You should know that I don't agree with this, but whatever in it. So that's where I'm at now with clients that have worked with me like for a while. If they're a beginner, I'll tell them don't do it. But if they're an intermediate client and they want to do something like that, I'll just say, go and do it. Just do it. And then you can come back to me and let me know when it fucks up. And I'll tell you why it didn't work. But that's where I'm at now.
And that's a sign of a mature coach, right? When you can sort of go, right, like nothing's inherently bad, but as long as you're looking at the data, you're not blindly telling people to follow these diets.
Yeah.
And it comes from a bunch of education that you've done, right? And then this is again, not to take this on too much of a tangent to finish off on, but that's my fear for the industry now, that people aren't investing in that education and they're going for the quick buck business thing. Like when I saw a fitness event here, right? That was the headliners were Ali Abdaal, Stephen Bartlett. We had James Smith, in all fairness, who's fitness, but like they were all business guys. I'm like, this isn't a fitness event. This is a business event.
Yeah, there you go. I think social media, isn't it? Online coaching.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this is the way it is. But the cream always rises to the top.
I think the online bubble will burst eventually. And these people that don't know anything, when people are fed up of getting these sleazy DMs in their inbox, they'll start looking for who is actually better. And this is where these coaches will eventually struggle. That's my prediction.
The unfortunate thing for them, it's going to cost them 20 times more by that point to work with high-level coaches. It won't be too long before it's 300 quid a month, 400 quid a month, 500 quid a month to get online coaching. It's not 50 quid. You want to work with the best coaches in a year, 3 years, 5 years. That's how much it's going to cost.
I agree with that, because they'll want to separate themselves from everybody else.
Exactly.
Because as the quality drops, they will now need to rise their prices to be to stand out.
And I'll tell you why that's going to happen, because my experience doing online coaching, this is how much I charge. I've done some consulting with a few people, beginner coaches, newbies, and they're charging the same. I was like, wow, cool. You can demand that. That's amazing. So I'm thinking, shit, I better put my rate up.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put it up by 50 quid. But way more than that.
Yeah.
And if I don't get booked or busy, I'm not even bothered. It's not about that.
Yeah.
It's a weird one.
So, man, on that note, because you have a session in 4 minutes,
I do.
for anyone who wants to be a beginner and be trained by you to go through all the things we've spoken about today, where are people finding you?
Stephen Collins Training. Fill out an application form. Reach out, and I'll get back to you.
And I will also plug your YouTube, which is also Stephen Collins Training, right? For a bunch of beginner tips as regards to training. But, mate,
Yes,
been a pleasure, as always.
As always,
Catch you next week.
All the best. Thank you.